This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work with another Wolff Responds. And this one is devoted to an analysis of the recent presidential election. I'll keep my comments brief because the real full development of the analysis is coming next week, Wednesday, November 18th at 7:30, 1 week later than our normal meeting time, which is on the second Wednesday of every other month. That is, we were scheduled to do this talk on the 11th of November, but because we believed that there might well be the delay in deciding this election that we are now seeing, we decided to give ourselves a bit more time and schedule it for the 18th, when indeed we will do the analysis, no matter what Mr. Trump may have done by that time. So please join me next Wednesday. It is an important date. I will offer you an analysis of the election and its implications, but I will also offer you short commentaries from a variety of people that I think have useful things to say about the election. Nomi Prince, noted author and former executive at Goldman Sachs, she'll be weighing in. Lee Carter, an elected member of the House of Delegates, the legislature in the state of Virginia, a Democrat and a socialist. Greek economist and politician Yanis Varoufakis, comedian and commentator Lee Camp, journalist Laura Flanders, and more. So join me for a remarkable evening analyzing and assessing the election. So now let me give you a brief foretaste of what we'll be talking about. On the one hand, we will be talking about the victory of Mr. Biden, first over the challenge of Bernie Sanders in the primary of the Democratic Party, and now in the general election. What is his program? Basically, it's two things. Number one, I am not Donald Trump. And number two, I'm going to get the United States back to normal, pre-Trump normal. This is a very scary idea, even though Mr. Biden presents it as the height of reasonable moderation. And of course, compared to Mr. Trump, he is reasonable moderation, and no doubt that's a major part of why he won the election. But pre-Trump normal is exactly how we got Trump. The steps taken in the 30 years before 2016 divided the country between rich and poor much more than it had been before then, developed the trends in moving jobs out of the country, in bringing more and more low-wage, low-income immigrants into the country, pushing the American dream further and further beyond the reach of more and more Americans. That was normal under both Republican and Democrats, as the establishments of those two parties operated their political monopoly, their systematic exclusion of third, fourth, and fifth parties, of the sort that are the normal, everyday reality of virtually all the countries of Europe. No, a policy of returning to normal is a little bit like saying to people, get back on that train that just ran into a wall and wrecked the country for 4 years. If Mr. Biden's regime really does take us back to what we were before, that would be a terribly bad decision and would likely produce again what it produced last time. Another 4 years for Donald Trump, or another Trump impersonator. Neither of the two candidates offered anything like a program adequate to the problems we have. Those problems are not merely the worst pandemic in a century, the worst preparation for a pandemic probably ever, the worst failure at containing the pandemic. Yes, it's the urgent requirement. Yes, it's good that Mr. Biden is assembling a team to work on it. Yes, we won't have a president who mocks a disease that has killed 250,000 of our citizens. But the problems of the United States have been accumulating, and they are not limited to COVID-19. We have a level of inequality in this society that is the worst also in a century. That's a fundamental problem. We have an economic system, a capitalist system, that whacks us with an economic crash, downturn, recession, depression, all the words for it, every 4 to 7 years. The last one was in 2008. We knew we were overdue. If it hadn't been COVID-19, it would have been something else. There's always a trigger. But the problem isn't the trigger. The problem is a system that gets triggered every 4 to 7 years. And this one is a doozy. We are really hurting our people, not only by undercutting their public health, but by undercutting their economic system. And then there's the climate disaster. And then there's the unsolved racial tensions in our society. I could go on, but the problems are overwhelming. They are radical in their number. They are radical in their depth. They are radical in how they interact and make one another worse. The virus makes the depression worse. The depression worsens the climate struggle. And all of that implodes to remind us of the gap between white, black, and brown people in this culture. When problems are as numerous, as deep, as radically urgent as they are, you need a radical response. And Mr. Biden and the Democratic establishment are devoted to not being radical. Within hours of the announcement, the Saturday after the election, that the votes were now sufficient to declare Biden the winner, people close to him began attacking Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and other progressives, socialists, and others. That's the fight looming. And let me be clear how it looks to me as an economist. Biden's team has no solution for the problems of this society. One of the reasons Trump lost is he had no solution either. His activities let the problem fester and get worse. And unless there are big changes, so too will Biden. That creates a danger, but also an opportunity for progressives to come up with a radical program that might be adequate. And just as the American people turned away from the Trump theater to Mr. Biden, so may they turn from Mr. Biden yet again to a Sanders or an Ocasio-Cortez, or to those able, willing, and ready to offer radical solutions as the better and more adequate response to the crisis of a declining U.S. capitalism and all that that means. We will go into these issues in detail, as well as engaging the comments of the guests I mentioned, 7:30 in the evening, Eastern Time, Wednesday, November 18th. I hope you will join us then. This is Richard Wolff for Democracy at Work.